George Washington is earning his own money and purchasing his own land by age 17.
The whole point of the West was to acquire title to land, but hold on to it. And in 10 or 20 years, as the American population grew, that land would become more valuable.
To your right. Come on now.
And this was the basis for more fortunes in American history than any other way of making money.
If you have land, even if you are an ordinary person, if you have plots of land, you can grow your own food. You had what would be called independence. So for Washington, having lots of land was important.
But his goals are about to be derailed. In 1763, a new royal proclamation poses a direct threat to Washington's investments. To avoid another expensive war on the frontier, King George III bans colonists from buying or settling land in the West.
What it does, essentially, is to run a boundary down the crest of the Appalachian Mountains. Everything west of the Appalachians is Indian country, and that land is off limits to British subjects.
This just upset the plans of Washington and every other American who was thinking of the West as, by this time, almost an American entitlement.
He owns about 60,000 acres of land that he's acquired through his service for the British in the French and Indian War. But in principle, it's saying all the land you have out there is worthless.
So, having had his ambition to be a great military man frustrated by British prejudice against the provincials, the rules seem to indicate that the British looked on Americans as second-class subjects.
So if the British Empire isn't good for you militarily and it's not good for you economically, what else is there?
This proclamation kicks off a decade of crackdowns on colonists' ambitions. It's followed by a slew of new taxes. Taxes that will help Britain pay off its debt from the French and Indian War.
Boston was at the cutting edge of opposition to British law, starting with the Stamp Act.
Everything that's paper, currency, newspapers, all being taxed.
This was a new kind of tax on goods that were in the colonies as opposed to things that were being imported. That shift, it alarmed Americans.
The colonists adopted boycotts in which they would not consume British goods.
The colonists are sending petitions. There is troops sent up to Boston.
Will the Americans come to blows over this? The Boston Massacre. American colonists killed by British fire.
You then have events like the Boston Tea Party, which is a protest against a tax on tea.
And then the Intolerable Acts.
Punishment for the Boston Tea Party.
Strike America like the blow of a hammer. The British have revoked the Charter of Massachusetts. They've closed the port of Boston.
People in other colonies are very much watching what's going on there, and they're thinking, that could happen here.
The cause of Boston now becomes the cause of all America.
And that's when we see George Washington become a reluctant revolutionary.
Washington considered himself to be British. He wanted to be a part of that imperial world. But when that fell apart, it's the kind of thing where you could only hate something that you had loved a lot.
You could argue that the British Empire slowly built the man who would destroy them from the inside out.
Washington is a believer that the British Empire intends to enslave the American population. He sees an orchestrated plot in the sense that we no longer have control over our own domestic policy.
The delegates are divided on how to proceed. While some want to keep petitioning Parliament, others are pushing for more radical action.
The colonists are demanding their rights and actually initially trying to use the system that's in place to get their rights. Sending petitions, traditional protests, doing the things you do as a colonist to express your needs and your demands.
Finally, the Congress agrees to an all-colony boycott of British goods, a move designed to pressure Britain to repeal their taxes and remove troops from Boston. Though revolution is still not a word uttered publicly, Washington is not convinced it can be avoided. The following spring, Washington's fears are realized at Lexington and Concord.
Lexington and Concord shocked Americans. That really stunned them. What does that mean if your own government now is firing upon you?
Until this point, most colonists were willing to say, if you could just wind back the clock, then all will be well.
All these people, including Washington, reached some point when they thought, you know, we just cannot remain part of the British Empire. We can't do it.
By the time the Second Continental Congress convenes 3 weeks later, the time has come to put down the quill and pick up the sword. The question is, who will lead the charge?
We need a military figure to go up to corral events and really become a commander of some kind of an army, whatever that army is going to be.
And they need somebody who will both be reliable politically, somebody who won't be at risk of trying to make himself a military dictator, but somebody who has the basic skills and knowledge to lead an army. And it's a pretty short list of men in North America who meet both of those requirements.
One of the most experienced is Horatio Gates, a British-born veteran who'd served on the frontier, married an American, and decided to stay.
He has held the King's Commission. He has been a commissioned officer. He's seen fighting, perhaps even more than Washington has.
But Gates was not a Virginian. And a lot of people, including John Adams, understood that Virginia, which was the largest colony at the time, needed to be invested in the war cause. And the best way to get Virginia invested was to put a Virginian at the very top.
It's important to Washington to be able to tell himself that he's not ambitious. It's important for him to be able to say, I'm not campaigning for this job.
That complicated cocktail of public projection, of balancing private ambition with the greater good, was something that Washington did as brilliantly as any American ever did.
I mean, there wasn't a large number of folks with the kind of stature that he had. If not him, who?
Washington, one of Virginia's delegates to the Second Continental Congress, shows up wearing a military uniform. It reminds people he has military experience. If you need a commander, look no farther. He is going to have to build this army, in effect, from himself down, by appearing to be the man of confidence, even when almost nobody else has confidence in the cause.
Washington fell in love with the country that was being created, and he was prepared to fight for it and die for it.
He passionately believes in the cause. He believes that as a virtuous man, he must set all of his skills, all of his abilities, all of his resources at the service of his countrymen. But he recognizes whoever leads this army is more likely than not to lose his life, to lose his fortune, and to lose his reputation. This is not a position of glory.
Washington always defined greatness as a willingness to do things not for yourself, but for others. And so every fiber of his being said he must do this.
After losing New York City to the British, George Washington and the Continental Army are on the run.
I am wearied almost to death with the retrograde motion of things. It is impossible to conduct matters agreeably to public expectation.
After the New York campaign, Washington fell into a pretty deep depression. He was deeply insecure that this was going to work and that he was going to be able to win.
Water, sir? Sir?
Melvin.
Sir.
Washington basically said, I would quit if I could, but people say there's no one to take my place. So we know Washington was at rock bottom.
By December, Washington's army is just weeks away from total collapse. At midnight on January 1st, enlistments for nearly all of his roughly 6,000 remaining soldiers will expire. Washington believes General Howe is waiting until then to make his move.
We have been pushed through the Jerseys. General Howe is now on the other side of the Delaware, and beyond all question means, if possible, to possess himself of Philadelphia. You know the fatal consequences that must attend its loss.
As the British begin to move in December 1776 toward the Delaware River, he knows he's going to need to find some way to convince these few thousand troops that he has left to stay in the field. But words are not going to be enough to make that happen.
It's quite amazing how he just kept going. And he was very good at figuring out, after early defeats, what would produce the most positive result.
If we can do something that's very visible and very symbolic, we might change the mood of the people, and we might find young men returning to our ranks. But time is short.
Some 20 miles from Washington's Bucks County headquarters, Trenton, New Jersey is now General Howe's southernmost outpost, a garrison manned by some 1,500 Hessian mercenaries.
The Hessians were professional soldiers from Germany that the British government had hired to augment their army. They were pros. They were some of the most feared warriors on earth.
Washington proposes a daring attack plan, a nighttime crossing of the Delaware. The army is to move in 3 columns, one as a diversion, another to block the enemy's escape route, and finally, a third, under Washington's command, to march on Trenton.
Billy, get the map. Summon the generals.
He wasn't ready to surrender the cause at that point. It might have been the rational thing to do, but history is made by people occasionally making irrational decisions in the pressure and amid the perils of a given moment.
Christmas Day, at night, 1 hour before day, is the time fixed upon for our attempt on Trenton. For heaven's sake, keep this to yourself, as the discovery of it may prove fatal to us.
You really have 2 choices. You either proceed or the entire enterprise collapses.
The weather is the worst it can possibly be. It's a hurricane in December.
The troops, they're still wearing their summer uniforms. Many of them are barefoot, literally barefoot. Their clothes in rags.
A lot of the soldiers didn't actually know how to swim, and the water was incredibly cold.
This is a nation, this is a people at their worst possible point, pushing on in the desperate hope that they can turn this thing around.
These are the times that try men's souls.
To rally his men for the treacherous crossing, Washington ordered his officers to read aloud the revolutionary words of Thomas Paine, published just days before.
The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman.
It was really a smart thing to do, because he knew he had to get to the other side. He was secure enough to know that Thomas Paine was a better speaker and a more passionate crafter of the English language. Paine will get them so fired up, they'll walk across the Delaware, they won't even need a boat.
Men, prepare to unload!
But once they get across the river, the clock is ticking.
Took us longer than we expected.
It's a near miracle none of our boats capsized.
Have we lost any cannons?
None.
Washington has coordinated an effort where this will all happen at dawn, but they're late.
When Washington's forces land in New Jersey, it's 3 a.m. They're hours behind schedule and still facing a 9-mile march to Trenton. The plan is to divide into 2 columns 4 miles outside of town, encircle the garrison, and barrage the Hessians with cannon fire before they have time to react.
Keep pushing, men! Bring it forward, men! Bring it forward!
Commanding a critical artillery unit, one of the country's rising stars, a young captain named Alexander Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton comes to the United States as an immigrant, functionally an orphan, attends King College. He is ambitious.
In some ways, has a lot of similarities to a young Washington. What Hamilton wants from the war more than anything else is a moment to shine on the battlefield so he can earn reputation and honor.
Quickly, on the shore! Form a line! We'll leave in 30 minutes! We're ready, General Washington.
You have done it, sir.
The job is not yet done. The battle is still before us.
Washington doesn't know it yet, but the 2 columns of soldiers due to cross upstream were stopped in their tracks by the brutal conditions. He and his 2,400 men are now on their own.
If they do not win this battle, it's over. So he rallies his men for one last toss of the dice.
The stakes are unimaginably high. The snow is coming down, the wind is whipping. They're freezing, but they have nothing else left. They will either prevail or they will die.
Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
General George Washington's daring Delaware River gambit pays off. With his first great battlefield victory of the Revolution. In less than an hour, 22 enemy soldiers are killed, some 900 taken prisoner. Not a single American is lost in the fight. General Charles Cornwallis
is one of the ablest British generals. He's quick-minded, he moves aggressively, he knows how to handle troops in the field.
The first order of business for General Cornwallis is to set up a base on the Chesapeake for the Royal Navy and his roughly 8,000 troops. By July, he chooses Yorktown. The post is easily accessible to the British fleet for resupply and reinforcement. But it's also vulnerable to the French, who finally see an opening to mount a decisive strike against the British. Within weeks, the Allies move into action. When the navies clash in September, the French score an unexpected victory, giving the Alliance control of the seas around Yorktown.
For once, the French Navy defeats the Royal Navy and drives them away from the mouth of Chesapeake Bay.
The French have achieved temporary, very brief naval superiority. This is the moment Washington has been looking for since 1775.
The Allied army arrives on the outskirts of Yorktown within weeks, cutting off Cornwallis's only remaining escape. With a combined 19,000 French and American soldiers, it's the most formidable fighting force Washington will ever command. To defeat Cornwallis, Washington and his allies opt for a classic siege. They create a series of trenches that creep ever closer to the enemy.
This is the moment where it all comes together for Washington. It was almost beyond his ability to comprehend that finally, after 6 years of thinking it was all about to fall apart, it was all on the edge of actually happening.
Fire! Reload!
Increase our bombardment. We cannot allow the British to rebuild their fortifications.
I doubt they will hold for another day.
And I doubt, Henry, that they will give up so easily.
"48 hours into the bombardment.
Out! All of you!
And trapped by Washington's forces, General Cornwallis is pinning all his hopes on reinforcement. Known as Redoubts 9 and 10, the fortifications are the last line of defense holding off the Americans from advancing their trench line to bombard the town at close range.
How many men does number 10 hold?
Perhaps 50, but heavily armed and well fortified. It will certainly not be easy to take.
We will need to overwhelm them.
And catch them by surprise. As soon as our men are spotted, they will come under heavy fire.
Send 400 men. Move out tonight under the cover of darkness.
And who shall lead them?
Alexander.
Hamilton is Washington's essential staff officer, but he doesn't want to stay a staff officer because real glory comes if you lead men in combat to victory. Washington becomes dependent upon Hamilton's competence, so he's reluctant to see Hamilton go.
Washington recognizes his own self in Hamilton. Hamilton wants to command an army. This is how a man is made.
This is the command you've been seeking, is it not?
Yes, sir.
The reward is high. The risk is equally as great.
I shall not let you down, sir.
Then the command is yours.
The fighting is over in just a matter of minutes.
With the taking of Redoubt number 10, Hamilton is a legitimate war hero. In many ways, it's the making of Hamilton.
By the point those two redoubts are captured, the writing is on the wall.
From their position at the captured redoubts, the Americans unleash a punishing point-blank assault on the British.
Sir, I propose an immediate cessation of hostilities for 24 hours, and that 2 officers be appointed from either side to discuss the terms of the surrender of the posts of York and Gloucester, etc., etc.
Yorktown is a crucial, crucial moment in the war. The fact that the Americans win that battle has huge psychological as well as military consequences. On the British side, they're outraged that they've lost and that these Americans appear to have gotten the better of them.
The Brits never quite understood what they were getting into, and they underestimated the nation that had been created. It's a mistake many people have made over the years. When you're defending a piece of land that's yours, you're prepared to die for it.
On October 19th, after a 3-week-long siege, the two sides meet on the battlefield for a formal surrender ceremony.
Cornwallis is too embarrassed, so he pretends that he's sick, and he sends out a subordinate to surrender the sword. This is the second British Army to surrender. The main British Army is still intact and still at New York City, but the will to fight in Great Britain is gone.
When the word of Yorktown reaches Britain, Lord North, the Prime Minister, says, "Oh my God, it's over."
And nearly 2 years after the final battle at Yorktown, the Treaty of Paris is finally signed. The war is over. George Washington spent decades of his life helping to create a new nation. Now 57, he's the only man the people trust to lead it. His election to the presidency is unanimous.
No president in American history did not wish to be president more than George Washington.
My movements to the chair of government will be accompanied with feelings not unlike those of a culprit who is going to the place of his execution.
He knew the minute he actually assumed the responsibilities of office, no matter how good a job he did, he was going to make some enemies. And that frightened him a lot. But to then turn around and walk away from this new entity that he had worked so hard to create at the very moment when arguably he was needed most would have been deemed an act of selfishness, which would contradict his code of honor.
I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Long live George Washington, President of the United States!